Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our speaker today, who is Julian Manley. He is at the University of Central Lancashire, but he tells me today also in Scotland. And he's Social Innovation Manager at the Centre for SME Development. He's worked since 2012 with Mondragon, that ecology of co-ops that has been so successful in maintaining living standards in the Basque Country in Spain. And he's also worked with Councillor Mathew Brown, who in developing the Preston Model, which we may well have heard of. So as he is the horse's mouth, I'm going to hand over to Julian to tell us more about this story of a successful development. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm going to share my screen. So this is the first tech challenge. Let's see if this works. Is that working? Can you see the slides?
Yeah, I can see them.
Great. Okay. Okay, so hi everybody. I've been asked to talk about this title slide here, the role of anchor institutions in the economic recovery in the Preston model, and how that's connected to the concept of community wealth building, and how that in the current situation might lead to post-COVID recovery plans. I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about the theory and design of the Preston model. And this slide here, I think, is really very instructive, and I'd like to pause a little while to have a look at this with you. As you can see, the Preston model is a cooperative model of cooperation between different actors in the city of Preston. And right in the middle, you have the city of Preston itself, because it is about the community, and that's why we talk about community wealth building. We have there to the bottom right of the city of Preston, Preston City Council, and they've got a special little connection to the city of Preston, because Preston City Council have been really leading the way in developing the Preston model. Connected to Preston City Council is a partnership with the University of Central Lancashire, and with the cooperation of the university and the feeding into the council, we've developed something called the Preston Cooperative Development Network, which is right above Preston City Council there. To the left of the University of Central Lancashire, you have the development of the Preston Cooperative Education Centre, which is connected to the developing cooperative university in partnership with the Cooperative College in Manchester, the University in Mondragon. And one of the exciting projects that's in development right now is the Northwest Mutual Community and Cooperative Bank. Right at the top of the city of Preston, you have the anchor institutions, and it's the anchor institutions, it's the work with the anchor institutions that began the whole work of the Preston model. Now, I've presented this slide as an ecosystem design because this is what it looks like now. This is the aspiration, but each of these elements in the Preston model are in different stages of development. So when we talk about the Preston model, we're not talking about a pre-designed, preconceived model, a kind of template which was just placed upon Preston. We're talking about a developing organic response to needs and necessities. As time has gone on, we've developed various aspects of those ideas, and little by little we've pieced them together to form this kind of ecosystem. Now, in our minds, as we're developing the model, and by the way, we never called it a model. Someone called it a model. I can't remember who, some journalist somewhere. In our own minds, in the development of the model, we have in mind as well a post-COVID green economy for Preston. And we're taking on board the ideas of Kate Raworth and the so-called donut economy. And for us, a post-COVID economy must also be a green economy. And that's most definitely the way that we're moving forward. And we don't see any, it's not an either or, it's not either a donut model or a Preston model. As far as we're concerned, the models go together. And all of these bits in the middle, where you can see the ticks appearing, all of these bits in the middle, they're the Preston model elements that contribute in this way to the model within the donut model. So what we have in the middle of this way we see the Preston model is the Preston model as part of a wider concern for the green economy of the future. The Preston model is based on principles and values before it's based on economics. Now that's just an important thing to bear in mind. We take inspiration from the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation, whose motto is humanity at work. And in Mondragon, you have an emphasis on humanity, an emphasis on labor, if you like, on people, and the financial capital is supporting the people, as opposed to the people supporting the development of the financial capital. So basically Mondragon, and the way we see it in Preston, any money, any wealth that's generated is generated to support people. And in particular, it's generated to create new jobs. And these jobs are not any old jobs. They're not 0-hour contract jobs or cheap jobs. These jobs are quality jobs governed by the living wage. So you can see in this slide that what you have are values and principles such as equality, education, people in employment, the idea of social transformation, ownership, because we're keen on people owning their worker-owned co-ops, cooperation and equity. And two of the main ingredients of our model is concerned with democracy and commitment, participating in a democratic fashion and committing yourself to the place of Preston. And as a result of that, building wealth. So it's truly a socio-economic model. As you can see, this is the web page, the new web page, in fact, from the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation. And you can see that those principles there, listed right in front of us there, those principles and values: intercooperation, grassroots management, corporate social responsibility, innovation, democratic organization, education, social transformation. These are all principles and values which govern the cooperatives in Mondragon, and they are the same principles and values that we want to govern the Preston model. And recently we've had a bit of a thought in our most recent meetings on the Preston model. We've got various steering committees on the go. And in a meeting I was in just yesterday, in fact, people were talking about pride of place. What does it mean to be a Prestonian? And I think that we're going to be thinking hard about that and developing that as we move towards creating a headquarters for the Preston model. We're going to have hopefully we're working towards having a building that the council, Preston City Council, will provide, under the roof of which will be the education centre, the incubation centre, the bank, and the Preston Cooperative Development Network. And someone made the point that to have a building and to call it the Preston Development Building or whatever is something that people will be really very proud of doing. And I think it's important because it goes back to that idea of principles and values we put the emphasis on principles, values, emotions, and feelings such as pride of place. We put that in a very, very high up prioritized position. So how far have we got? Well, the statistics for some of what we've achieved, I think, are quite impressive. So you can see here that you have 2012 to 2017, and you have statistics for Preston and statistics for the region of Lancashire around Preston. And you can see that in 2012, the spend of anchor institutions in Preston was about 5%. So those anchor institutions only spent 5% of their total spend in Preston in 2012. By the time you get to 2017, and of course now in 2020 it'll be even greater, by the time you get to 2017, that spend has increased to 18.2%, which is round about £75 million. And in the Lancashire region, it's even more impressive. The anchor institutions in Preston were spending 39% of their total spend in Lancashire. And by the time you get to 2017, that's nearly 80%, which is quite a stunning change in repatriating, if you like, regathering the wealth that is in Preston and making sure Preston retains that wealth. And we're talking there about something in the region of £200 million repatriated into the Preston economy. And if we look at this graph here from PwC demos, you can see that between 2015 to 17, according to their research, Preston is the most improved city in the Good Growth Index. But not only is it most improved, I think what's really interesting about this slide is by how much it's way ahead of the other cities that are very kind of in a similar place. So you can see that the results have been really impressive in terms of growth and in terms of increasing local wealth. And this has generated a huge amount of media interest. It's brought national, international media coverage. For a time, it was even identified when Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the opposition, it was identified as Corbynomics. But this is a term that was never invented or accepted by people in Preston, because for many people in Preston, this way of working together that the Preston model brings with it is about the basics of life. It's about quality jobs. It's about living wage. It's about an economic and social legacy. And often, if you go to Preston, you ask people, oh, what do you think of the Preston model and so on? Either they'll say, oh, they don't know and they've never heard of it. But if they have heard of it, they'll say, oh, yeah, it's just common sense. You know, who's going to argue with quality jobs? Who's going to argue with a living wage? Who's going to argue with doing things together and improving the place where we live? So I think that's a really important thing to consider, because I think some people are put off by the idea that maybe Preston is some hotbed of radical left-wing politics, which it really isn't. It's really, as far as people are concerned, it's common sense. Having said that, of course, it's true that the Labour Party at the time took it under its wing and created the Community Wealth Building Unit. Now, although the Labour Party created the Community Wealth Building Unit, I think what's interesting is that the idea of community wealth building has gone way beyond politics. It's something that I think has attracted people, particularly in the coronavirus crisis, as a way of understanding what community is, and a way of imagining how you might keep jobs, create jobs in community when the community is under stress and duress, as in the coronavirus crisis. So it may have begun with a sort of Corbynomics feel, and it may have been encouraged by the Labour Party, but actually these days I think community wealth building is a pretty standard idea that's floating around the country. So where are we going? The gap, what do we mean by the gap? Well, after the anchor institutions had been persuaded to spend more money, to procure locally more and more, there came a moment when the procurement officers in the anchor institutions were saying things like, well, you know, we've done our bit. We can't buy more locally, either in Preston or Lancashire, because there's no one to sell us this stuff. There are some things that simply, there are no providers, no suppliers in Preston or in Lancashire, so we have to go elsewhere. So that's what we identified as an economic gap. And so what we're doing now is we're working towards filling that economic gap. We're creating businesses that respond to that gap, that will provide supplies and opportunities for anchor institutions to buy locally. And in order to do that, we created the Preston Co-operative Development Network, because although we did want to, or although we do want to fill that economic gap, and we want to make sure that anchor institutions can continue to increase local wealth, we want to do it ethically, and we want to do it according to the principles and values of the Preston model. So although in theory any business would increase local wealth, we're also interested in increasing local social capital. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to plug that economic gap by creating worker-owned cooperative businesses. And that's the reason for creating the Preston Cooperative Development Network, which is in charge of creating awareness of cooperatives and cooperative working, of attracting people to begin new cooperative businesses, and to work alongside Preston City Council and the University of Central Lancashire in doing so. On our way towards doing this, we've received some funding from the Open Society Foundations, and that is enabling us to create the co-ops, the worker-owned co-ops. So 10 new worker-owned co-ops will be created in the next 18 months or so. One of them will be a union co-op. So we're trying to develop completely new ideas about what it means to create a co-op, where that a union co-op is a co-op which includes a high percentage of union input into the way the co-op is governed. We're creating a Preston Cooperative Education Centre, which is also connected to the Cooperative University project in partnership with Cooperative College in Manchester. And we are learning as well. So we are creating and developing, and we're learning. And the learning, the emphasis on learning is an idea that we took from Mondragon. In Mondragon, they place a huge emphasis on education and learning. We understand that people are not necessarily clear on what working in cooperation is. We live in a society where individual competition is very much to the fore, and people need to be supported in understanding how economics and social relationships can change, and we do that through education. So we have some training from Mondragon and an organization called One Worker, One Vote in the United States, and we have a monitoring, evaluation and learning that goes alongside the OSF funding. And there are other ideas which are very exciting to us and which are making progress. So as some of you may know, in Mondragon, in order to continue developing their cooperatives, they created their own bank, which is now called Laboral Cucha. It was called Caja Laboral before. And we're aware that when we come to a stage where we no longer have grant money, we no longer have funding, and the central government is working hard to reduce the funding and take it away from councils. When we reach a stage when people can't depend on grants and funding, we want them to be able to borrow money and to invest in a cooperative bank. So we're creating a cooperative bank. We're well on the way. We have a bank registered, and we're in the process of collecting the capital. And we estimate that in about 18 months, 24 months from now, we'll open the first branch of the Northwest Mutual Bank in Preston. As I said before, the Preston Cooperative Education Centre is fundamental. The Cooperative Education Centre will also be the future university. It'll be offering training and education at the basic level, based on trade union education, skills-based, technical-based education on the one hand, and on the other hand, offering a BA in cooperative leadership and management, which will be validated eventually by the Cooperative University. So we're offering a diverse and inclusive range of education. And the idea is that once people have had a cooperative education in different kinds of skills needed for creating businesses, that they will then go on to create a cooperative business, fill the economic gap. And we are developing an incubation center to do that. So people move from the Cooperative Education Centre to the incubation hub. This work is ongoing. I do like to emphasize that. It's not as if, you know, we did the Preston model and now it's just trundling along. As you can see here, 19th of October, we had this meeting, Designing Cooperative Entrepreneurship Initiative for Preston, with a consultancy and training team from Mondragon. Coming up, we have a Community Anchors Cooperative Recovery program for the BAME community in Preston, encouraging the BAME community to make their own future happen in the future economy in Preston by being aware of worker-owned cooperatives and possibly pitching for the funding that's available to do that. And the question, why should we or why shouldn't we, is one that sometimes people in anchor institutions, particularly when we started, were asking. You know, you go to someone, a procurement officer, and you say, well, look, can you increase your local procurement? And very often they turn around and say, well, you know, maybe, why should we? Anchor institutions are important to the model because of these 3 bullet points here. Because they are rooted in the local area, they have an important interest in their role in community, and they're not going anywhere. So whatever happens, whatever economic crisis comes upon us, we're keeping our fingers crossed that the anchor institutions, for example, the university, Lancashire County Council, this is the building here, Lancashire County Council, Preston's College, Preston City Council, the hospital, the police, those are the anchor institutions. They're not going to go anywhere. And they're big spenders, so the more they can spend locally, the better. And they're also big employers, and they tend to employ quality employment as opposed to 0-hour contracts and so on. So it's a win-win situation for everybody if we were able to persuade anchor institutions to spend more of their big spend in Preston and to employ more people in quality jobs in Preston as well. This was the problem that we began with. The problem was that 61% of spend was leaking out of the Lancashire community. And we've seen that that has radically changed now. So this is the success of the anchor institution development in there as far as part of the Preston model. It wasn't just something that we dreamed up. It did come out of facing a disaster, because in Preston, when we began, we had a huge inward investment project called the Tithe Barn project that collapsed. And with the collapse of that project, it just seemed that we had nothing left in Preston. And that's when Mathew Brown in particular, who is now leader of Preston City Council, dreamt up the idea of, instead of bringing inward investment, why don't we just make sure that the wealth that's created in Preston is retained in Preston. The process for this is one of persuasion, and I think that that's a terrifically exciting message, because in order to get agreement from the anchor institutions to increase their local procurement, all we had was persuasion. All we had was going to procurement officers, going to finance officers, going to senior staff in the anchor institutions and persuading them that it was a good idea to do so. So there was almost no money invested in this, except, if you like, the time of councillors' time and a little bit of investment in organisations like the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, who help push it along. So what you need is to educate and influence leaders in anchor institutions. It's important to change the culture, in this case, to change the culture of procurement officers, but of course, in the case of the Preston model as a whole, it's important to change the culture of all the actors in communities in Preston. And it's important to change our mindset from out and out capitalism, which is based on competition, to cooperation across institutions and with the commercial sector. So when we talk about cooperation, although we are developing worker-owned cooperatives as businesses in Preston, we mean by cooperation people who are not involved in cooperatives simply agreeing to cooperate with each other. So cooperation in that sense as well. We developed statements of intent. We discussed with procurement officers what kind of spending could be influenced, what could be changed, and we reimagined what the market might be. And these are the, if you like, the learning outcomes from that process, that it's important to join the dots and create solutions. You have to produce evidence for change. So those statistics is part of that evidence. And cultural change is important. There's got to be a buy-in, a political buy-in, a strategic buy-in from the different community groups in Preston, as well as the political representation and as well as the business community. All of them need to buy into it in some sense. And there's the idea emerges that procurement can actually drive social change. So it is about economics, but it's about social change as well. And that's really important. And the final learning outcome is that when people get together in networks, it's so much more effective. And so the Preston Cooperative Development Network isn't just an agency that creates and advises cooperatives, such as you have in Cooperatives UK in Manchester, for example. It's actually a group that joins together the different cooperatives in a networked fashion so that cooperatives can help each other, what Mondragon calls inter-cooperation between cooperatives, as opposed to competing cooperatives. Here are the steps which are typical of local community wealth building with anchor institutions. You have a political idea, an idea of philanthropy, possibly. You understand what it is you're wanting to achieve. You always make sure that you have senior management backing it up. Scales of impact, developing strategies, governance arrangements around this set of activities, measuring the impact, and influencing others. And this is a list from the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, who were supportive in Preston City Council's work at the beginning of their work with anchor institutions. And a lot of this is really about changing cultures, changing to a can-do feel. I think that's really important. In other words, a lot of this is sort of psychological or emotional. It's based on commitment and thinking out of the box. I know that later on in these series you've got a whole talk about social value, but it's a good example here of how you can do by changing your view of what it's possible to do. So we did go to procurement officers and we said to them, look, did you know that the EU directives only affect procurement above £180,000 for goods and services and above £4 million for works? Well, a lot of procurement officers might have known that more or less, but they simply assumed, very often we found that people assumed that it was against the law to offer work and buy goods locally, maybe without tendering it nationally. And it's not as simple as that. And it's possible to tender locally, for example, as long as you follow these guidelines here. That's on the one hand, and on the other hand, people were unaware that the Social Value Act of 2012 allows you to operate a weighting system as part of your competitive tendering. So, for example, you could ask people as part of the process, if you get this contract, what will this do to your carbon emissions? And if you're a local company, if you're with 3 white vans, then your carbon footprint is going to be far less than if you're some global corporation and you've got juggernauts coming from Brussels all the way to Preston. So that's really important. And as soon as people realize that you can weigh social value criteria into your competitive tendering, then you can change the nature of the competition. And suddenly, local providers and local suppliers who thought they never had a chance of winning contracts with the big institutions, suddenly they were in there with a chance because the criteria gave them an opportunity to compete with the big global corporations. And changing the culture, the idea of the bank, we want to make sure that, in a sense, we're going to go back to ye olde bank, the kind of bank that you had in Dad's Army, where but with a better manager, where the local bank manager and the staff know the people, and it's more of a human project, and that the bank has a social project, not just an economic project. And my friend and colleague Oscar Muguerza, writing in Spain, he's in charge of a project with Laboral Cucha, which is the Mondragon Bank, to give training and advice and financial support for new cooperatives in the Basque Country in the north of Spain. And they do that in Laboral Cucha. They do that as a bank. I mean, they make money, but they don't just think of that. They think of very much, to put a great emphasis on the social aspect. As he says here, social value, as far as they're concerned in Laboral Cucha, is fundamental. Each and every one of us, we have to think about where we buy, what we buy. The ideal would be to buy something from Gipuzkoa, which is the local area around Mondragon, or from somewhere close. Whatever we spend close by will rebound for the benefit of all. And not is it only the where, but also the what? Because in Gipuzkoa, you can buy something produced by a person from Gipuzkoa, or German, Chinese, American. The closeness must be on both sides. And this is not only true of everyday consumers, but also of companies. They have to find providers close by. So he's talking there not just about anchor institutions, but businesses as well. Not just a question of the local butcher or the fishmonger, but also banking and supermarkets is for all. We have to value what we have, the local. So that's it. That's the end of the talk. And I think that this final image here demonstrates, I think, from the insect world, what we aspire to in Preston, working together it makes sense. Otherwise, you could never go from one leaf to the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian, for what felt like a very comprehensive talk and very illuminating. And it's very interesting to see how much you have brought from the Mondragon experience, which of course you've been working for many years and not just recently. I can see that we already have quite a number of questions building up in the chat column, so I think we could probably go straight to